The scientific description and the hypothesis, theory and law of science. In this tutorial, we will cover the aspects of scientific description and how they relate to and form the three main scientific conclusions: the hypothesis, theory, and law. Science requires a cautious and reasonable observation of reality. However, not all situations allow for precise measurement. When one sees something, regardless of the scenario, the information can be placed into two main categories: qualitative information and quantitative information. Qualitative information is non-numerical, such as that knowledge which one might acquire through the unmeasured observation of something. For example, one might spot a criminal and describe him as a man of medium height with a heavy build. Qualitative information might be used to phrase something in a more understandable manner, such as saying that a boy is extremely tall for his age. Qualitative information is relative to the standard it is compared to, and each situation gives each word a slightly different meaning. For example, one might say the boat approached the dock quickly, even if it was approaching at the speed of 10 miles per hour, while one might say the race car was traveling slowly over a rough section of road, though the car may be traveling at 80 miles per hour. In contrast, quantitative information is numerical. One might say the convict was 5'10" and 180 pounds. Unlike qualitative information, quantitative information is exact. We might acquire this information through several ways. Our conclusion may have been reached through an experiment, which is a test or procedure that is performed for the purpose of discovering a result. For example, one might mix a quarter cup of vinegar with a tablespoon of baking soda. Observation, which is qualitative information we collect through the use of our senses. One might observe the mixture of vinegar and soda begins to fizz and expand. An interpretation, which is an attempt to give the observation meaning, or inference. One might see the mixture of vinegar and soda and come to the conclusion that these ingredients react with each other in the environment provided. One might infer that should the bottle be closed, the level of internal pressure would increase. A description, which is a list of properties. One might describe that when vinegar is mixed with soda, it expands, becomes white and fizzy, and changes in texture. Data, which is quantitative information. One might collect data on the mixture of vinegar and soda by measuring the time from the beginning of the reaction to the end, when a quarter cup of vinegar is mixed with a tablespoon of soda. A time of 3.54 seconds is data. When a scientist tests the world around him and begins to form conclusions based upon his observations, he might form a conclusion that falls into one of the following three categories. A hypothesis. A hypothesis is a single, unproven assumption or idea why something behaves in a specific manner. A hypothesis is initially tentative, however they may eventually gain general acceptance. An example of this hypothesis is evolution. Another example would be that all gases are made up of tiny fast-moving particles, or that the tiny particles in gas transfer some or all of their energy of movement when they collide with one another or the walls of their container. Another would be that the tiny particles in gas act like miniature billiard balls and the entire system undergoes no net change in energy when particles collide. A theory is a set of hypotheses that tie together with a large number of real-world observations to form a logically consistent and understandable pattern. A theory is a refined, expanded, and tested explanation of why things behave a certain way. An example of a theory is the kinetic theory of gases, that states that gases act as they do because they are made up of point-like particles which are constantly moving, colliding, and exchanging energy. This theory combines the three hypotheses mentioned above. All gases are made up of tiny, fast-moving particles. The tiny particles in gas transfer some or all of their energy of movement when they collide with one another or the walls of their container. The tiny particles on gas act like miniature billiard balls, and the entire system undergoes no net change in energy when the particles collide. Contrary to what is often believed, a theory cannot become a law. A law is a broad generalization or summary statement which describes a large amount of evidence stating how something behaves in a particular situation. Laws may be formed before theories are created to explain why they are true. Laws are not proven theories. An example of a law is Boyle's law, which states that if the temperature is unchanged, the greater the pressure applied to a sample of gas, the smaller its volume. So that covers scientific description and the 3 levels of scientific conclusions.